Good evening, everybody. Breaking tonight, the swamp may not be yet drained, but it's clear for the first time in a very long time who has not only the mandate, but now the power to get that swamp drained. President Trump has a lot more friends suddenly and allies than before. And he has more, it seems, than the left, the GOP establishment, and the deep state combined. All of those folks thought none of this that's happened over the last few days was possible not so very long ago. But possible indeed it is, and winning indeed he does. And finally we have tax reform heading to conference and soon to be law. Some of the allies, by the way, are fighting back against the special counsel witch hunt. The House Intelligence Committee Chairman Devin Nunes has now directed his staff to prepare a contempt of Congress resolution against Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein and FBI Director Christopher Wray for allegedly hiding a top agent's alleged political bias against President Trump. We'll have the full report for you here tonight. Also, a major legal victory for the president. The Supreme Court now allowing the president's travel ban to go into full effect while legal challenges proceed in lower courts. And a show of strength against North Korea. The United States and South Korea launching the largest ever joint Air Force drills, war games that the North has condemned as provocation. We'll take it all up here tonight. Our top story, more trouble for the special counsel, Robert Mueller, a man who is not only in significant trouble for his conflicts of interest, but whose actions as special counsel clearly now reveal a pro-Clinton, anti-Trump attitude so profound, so pervasive, so strong that it has influenced not only the hiring of prosecutors, but has influenced as well the investigative assignments of top FBI officials. Tonight we know that the special counsel removed Peter Strzok from the Mueller team in August. We know why he was removed, and we now have a reasonably clear picture of his previous assignments and contemporary assignments and why Mueller did everything he could to avoid making public the reasons for Strzok's removal. Here are just some of the Strzok assignments that we know of. 1, led the investigation of Hillary Clinton's email server. 2, he took part in the drafting of Comey's statement on Hillary Clinton's actions in the email case. 3, he interviewed then National Security Advisor General Michael Flynn. Fox News Chief Washington Correspondent James Rosen has our report.
As a former Deputy Assistant Director of the FBI for Counterintelligence, Peter Strzok was a major player in the investigation into Hillary Clinton's private server, even participating in Mrs. Clinton's lone interview with the FBI in July 2016.
No reasonable prosecutor would bring such a case.
And Strzok reportedly helped persuade then FBI Director James Comey to forego prosecution of Mrs. Clinton. That same month, according to published reports, Strzok was one of a dozen FBI officials who received the dossier, the compendium of salacious and largely unverified allegations about Mr. Trump and his associates that was bankrolled by the Clinton campaign and the DNC, and which the FBI may have used to launch a counterintelligence probe that encompassed FISA surveillance on a Trump campaign advisor.
No collusion. No collusion.
Then Strzok became a top figure in the probe of alleged Trump-Kremlin collusion led by special counsel Robert Mueller until July of this year, when Mueller learned Strzok had sent a colleague text messages said to be critical of Mr. Trump and supportive of Mrs. Clinton, and removed him from the special counsel team.
Now we find out the FBI had pro-Hillary, anti-Trump people at the heart of the Hillary investigation. Very troubling.
And the fact that this was one of the lead agents on the Hillary Clinton email investigation, if true, I think it's very disturbing and possibly could call for a reopening of that investigation.
Fox News reported late Saturday that the FBI Inspector General is now reviewing Strzok's role in the Clinton probe and other politically sensitive cases, with a source close to the matter saying that the review should be completed early next year.
Oh, absolutely. We've been stonewalled.
Tipped off by an informant about a potential problem with Strzok, House Intelligence Committee Chairman Devin Nunes has been seeking to interview him for 2 months. Saturday afternoon, shortly after the New York Times and Washington Post reported on the incendiary texts, DOJ emailed the counsel to House Speaker Paul Ryan to say Strzok would be made available to the Nunes panel after all. Fox News has confirmed, as first reported by Sarah Carter, that Peter Strzok also oversaw and participated in the questioning of Michael Flynn on January 24 that led to his guilty plea last week. And we've confirmed that it was Peter Strzok, as first reported by CNN, who changed James Comey's draft language in the Hillary Clinton decision from grossly negligent, a phrase that carries possible criminal penalties, to extremely careless, a phrase with no real legal implications. Lou?
James, thank you very much. James Rosen. Joining us now to assess these latest revelations on the special counsel, George Washington University law professor Jonathan Turley, one of the country's leading experts on constitutional law. And Professor, it is great to have you with us, and we have a large menu for you from which to draw. Let's start with these latest developments in which we are finding that Strzok was involved in nearly every facet of the FBI investigations and that of Robert Mueller's special counsel. This is an extraordinarily active fellow with an anti-Trump bias that apparently was being played out at the very top in the FBI as well as the special counsel.
Well, you know, it is true that one of the things that the Justice Department looks at when someone has a problematic or tainted history is to how to control the damage. How far did this person go? This individual seems to have been everywhere at every time throughout these investigations. So the idea of sort of controlling the damage could be difficult. The other thing is that I think at this point, I've said for some time that regardless of on which side you're on, the Russia investigation, the Clinton investigation, the public as a whole has very little respect for the process, has a lot of suspicion for everyone on both parties in Washington. And I think when you reach that point, it's a time to just have all these investigations go forward and to be as transparent as possible. And so I think this supports those that want to have some answers on why changes were made. And I have to say, Lou, the thing that catches my eye the most is this idea that he was a key player in changing that language.
Exactly.
The extreme carelessness when it was first uttered by Comey, most of us reacted immediately and said, what's that? I mean, that's not a legal standard. And it just seemed to come out of the head of Zeus. If it came out of this guy's head, and if no one else was supporting it, then it's a matter to be concerned, because it really didn't make a lot of sense at the time.
Yeah, and that what was, by all appearances, a rhetorical equivalency was used by FBI Director James Comey to avoid gross negligence, but they mean precisely the same thing, do they not?
Well, they really do. The problem with the Clinton investigation is that obviously there was gross negligence, and there was also false statements that were made. At the time, I wrote columns saying that I was really surprised at the agreements that the Clinton people were able to forge. I mean, first of all, the Clinton team refused to speak. Hillary Clinton refused to speak. Her top people refused to speak with the State Department that was investigating whether security had been breached. That alone was astonishing. And then to find out that the Department of Justice cut these immunity deals and had these agreements to get rid of certain evidence like laptops, I have to tell you, I thought was quite breathtaking. I've been a criminal defense attorney for a long time, and those seem to me to be rather odd for the Justice Department investigating a major case.
Professor, I have literally talked to not a single attorney who can find any other example in which key witnesses and possibly subjects of an investigation have been granted immunity wholesale to the point, this extreme on the part of the Clinton staffers and top officials of the campaign. It stands alone.
Well, I thought that was a legitimate issue that really hasn't been fully answered. I thought it was particularly odd to read accounts that some of the Clinton people had said they're not going to turn over computers with government material on it until they had certain assurances. that was government material. They didn't have to strike a deal. There wasn't a judge in this country that wouldn't have ordered those to be turned over. So that's the stuff that left me confused. It doesn't mean that there's crimes involved. It doesn't mean it would have resulted in prosecutions. But these are legitimate concerns.
Right. And the destruction of devices, the list goes on. But when we look to Strzok, his involvement in such a broad range of issues that involve Hillary Clinton, and every one of them was decided in the favor of Clinton and against what is, I think it's fair to say, obvious crimes that were committed, whether it be putting a server and conducting state business on it with classified information. It was as if they introduced concepts of intent. They introduced the idea that material was not compromised when we had full, straightforward statements that we expect that there were compromised classified documents as a result of her placing that private email server, quote unquote, in her home. And with this, with such a range of charges against Strzok, and the changes that remain against James Comey, the fired FBI director, do you believe it is reasonable to expect we're going to see the Hillary Clinton email case and as well the Clinton Foundation case reopened?
Well, I'm not too sure. I think the Department of Justice is going to allow the Inspector General to finish this investigation. The Inspector General has a great ability to dig on something like this. And my understanding is that the IG is communicating with leadership in the House about that investigation. I have a feeling they're going to let that run to its conclusion. But I do think that there's going to be a lot of people who want some answers. In legislation we talk about regular order. There was nothing regular about how the Clinton investigation was handled. Once again, that doesn't mean that there were crimes. But I think the public does have a legitimate interest in learning exactly what happened at this point, because there's just too much, I think, concern among citizens that their government is this series of partisan conspiracies on both sides.
I think, if I may say, and forgive me because we're so far over on time, but I have to say, Jonathan, I truly believe there are so many questions now about the lack of ethics, the lack of ethical concerns about obvious conflicts of interest and assignments that were so critical to the republic, if you will, that I don't believe the American people would ever have faith in this Justice Department or the FBI again if these investigations are not reopened and a decided, determined, and transparent removal of all conflicts of interest, at the very least, is assured as they go forward.
Well, I think that's clearly a valid point, and there are lingering questions, and I think it's damaging to everyone to have them go unanswered.
Jonathan Turley, as always, great to have you with us.
Thanks,
Thank you. We're coming right back. There is much, much more on this story and many more in the swamp. Stay with us. We'll be right back. President Trump strongly criticizing the FBI for unfair treatment of former National Security Advisor Michael Flynn.
I will say this. Hillary Clinton lied many times to the FBI. Nothing happened to her. Flynn lied, and they destroyed his life. I think it's a shame.
We take up Robert Mueller's witch hunt against the president with Ambassador John Bolton. Obama has gone from absentee president to shadow president, now attacking President Trump for withdrawing from the climate change treaty. We have more on Obama's shadow tour here next. Stay with us. A big win for President Trump. The Supreme Court today ruled the Trump administration may fully implement its travel ban even as legal challenges continue. Travel will now be fully restricted from 6 Muslim-majority countries. Lower courts had ordered exceptions for people with bona fide connections to the United States, including family ties. The Supreme Court is expected to take up the case by June. Former President Obama's arrogance and his compulsion to undermine President Trump once again in full display this weekend as he continued what appears to be a global shadow tour. Speaking in Paris, Obama railed against what he called a temporary absence of American leadership. Can you imagine the arrogance? It's breathtaking. Saying that, he said, because the Trump administration chose to withdraw from the job-killing Paris Climate Agreement. Amazing. Joining me now, former UN Ambassador John Bolton, American Enterprise Institute Senior Fellow, Fox Business contributor. Great to have you here.
Glad to be here.
I cannot believe this guy. He's emulating what he did in May, following President Trump around, instead of apologizing, attacking the president.
Yeah. Look, he doesn't know what to do with himself now that he's no longer president.
Could I send him a few suggestions?
Yeah, I'm sure we could. He's engaged in what it appears the Mueller investigation wants to go after the Trump administration on, a violation of the famous Logan Act, conducting his own foreign policy overseas, no less. I mean, this is another demonstration of the hypocrisy of what we're facing in Washington.
This is subversion. This is beyond just ignorance. It's beyond opposition. It's beyond resistance. This is outright subversion. There has never been a president who has ever done this to his predecessor in American history.
Well, I think it's part and parcel of the complete unwillingness of the opposition to acknowledge they lost the election. They're still unable to process it.
But why do we keep carrying that around? I mean, John, what I'm asking is, who gives a damn what they acknowledge? It is the reality. If they refuse to recognize reality, then, let them go get medication, treatment, whatever is required. But let's move the republic ahead.
Well, that's what we should do.
And that's what President Trump is doing.
They're trying to prove the administration is illegitimate, and
illegitimate.
That's what you can say.
They are the ones who are. I mean, this Leandra English at the Consumer.
The Wall Street Journal said this is the first attempted coup d'état in American history. I mean, it's a mini coup d'état, but it goes right along with the idea that they should have won the election.
Transfer of power is not minor.
Yeah, and one recalls the famous scene in the debate where I think it was Chris Wallace asked both candidates, "If you lose, will you accept the result?" And
Don't tell me. Did Hillary lie?
Well, look, remember William Safire, the great columnist for the New York Times, who 20 years ago called Hillary a congenital liar. 20 years ago.
Yeah, and I think that it was a persuasive case he made, as usual, when Bill got a hold of the facts and the language. But this should not be a surprise to anyone. Yet the national media has moved to a different place. The national media has become not only left-wing, but it's a closed feedback loop. And it is broadcasting only to those who support one point of view, and that is the leftist view. And the Clintons, I think it's immaterial whether it's the Clintons, although they play a major role in it, or any other part of the left.
Yeah. Well, I think the real threat to the Trump administration remains the Mueller investigation. Dianne Feinstein gave away the story yesterday, not that it wasn't obvious that they're seeking an obstruction of justice conspiracy
but
here.
That's such a ridiculous charge. It's because they've exhausted the illegitimacy charge. The Russian collusion has been rejected. All they have left is obstruction of justice.
But it's dangerous for this reason.
Because Mueller's in the special counsel.
What they've got here is they've created a category of crimes that only exist because of the investigation. Lying to the FBI, perjury, subornation of perjury, destruction or alteration of documents or other evidence, obstruction of justice itself. They could indict people for those crimes if they were investigating their Christmas card list.
If Speaker Ryan and Mitch McConnell, the majority leader, if they had guts, decency, and integrity, they would be as locked up on the shoulders of this president, moving forward to move this special counsel out. The timid Jeff Sessions, a disastrous choice for Attorney General. Enough said, it's done, but now let's move forward. This is an affront against law and order being carried out by the left. It needs to stop, and that's it.
Yeah. Look, I've been fighting the very concept of the independent counsel for 30 years since I worked for Ed Meese at the Justice Department. This is not a constitutional exercise. It's extraordinarily dangerous.
What we're learning about Peter Strzok, the little fellow who was obviously the minion of James Comey, the FBI director, involved in nearly every major Clinton, I think every major Clinton scandal, deciding, and an anti-Trumper of the highest order, coloring all of the conclusions of investigations.
Yeah.
No wonder nothing ever goes anywhere. And it's ridiculous.
It's why people are losing faith in the government, and particularly the FBI.
Who the hell in their right mind would have faith in the Justice Department or the FBI?
Honestly, that's why President Trump should have fired Jim Comey on January the 20th. I think a lot of this would have been obviated.
That's quite something. We sit here and we talk about he should have fired him sooner. It took great courage for him to do it when he did it, because every maven in the world was telling him, no, there will be such political backlash. You can't do the right thing. This is a president who is here because he's done the right thing. He's said the right thing. What's the right thing for him to do now?
Well, I think they've got to take this Mueller investigation seriously, whether it should be there, because it is the way.
How about blow it the hell up out of there?
It is the way that the opposition does the groundwork for the impeachment charge that's coming if we lose control of the House.
Now you're going to throw an impeachment charge to boot in this thing? We're supposed to take it seriously? At what point do the majority leaders of the Senate and the House take responsibility for this government and side with this president on every damn issue? Because unity works. They've just seen it.
Yeah. Well, I think the tax cut may be a galvanizing event. I think now they can come back in January and go after Obamacare. Hopefully the Senate provision repealing
bloody hell, man, I'm asking you about keeping the Republic going.
And that requires keeping the Republican majorities in the House and Senate, because make no mistake, if Nancy Pelosi is Speaker after next November, the first order of business will be to impeach Trump.
I don't often make this complaint on this broadcast, but I think you have actually seen too far into our future. We have a threat against the Republic, against the legitimate president of the United States, and you're talking about after the midterms. I'm saying to you, this majority leader, this speaker, this president have to align themselves and be unified and move this government forward and roll over the nonsense that is Robert Mueller, with all of his conflicts of interest, with Peter Strzok, who pollutes the entire seventh floor of the FBI. I mean, this is a disaster.
No, it's really unbelievable. As Benjamin Franklin said at the Continental Congress, gentlemen, we must all hang together, or surely we will all hang separately, and it's getting close to that now.
I think that I'm one of those people who would suggest that, forget about hanging, just clean up the damn mess. Hanging, cruel and unusual punishment, whether separately or individually or collectively. Ambassador John Bolton, thanks for
always good to be with you.
The tour through American history. Good to see you. Up next, Robert Mueller's partisan witch hunt. Well, we know why he's doing it. It's been exposed, and a former key member of his team unmasked as an anti-Trump zealot. Why not shut down this general counsel? Because it is corrupt to the core. I take it up next in my commentary. Stay with us. We'll be right back. A few thoughts now on the special counsel and his lead investigator, who was, before all else, it appears, an anti-Trumper. Robert Mueller and Peter Strzok obviously thought they were under no compunction to be fair, to be honest, to be decent. And now it's clear that Mueller thought he could remove Strzok as his head investigator and never have to answer a single question about the reason he did so. Congress is now making it clear that he will have to answer. And by the way, make that reasons, not reason. It's far more than one. The devout anti-Trumper was chosen to help lead the Clinton email investigation starting in July of 2015. He was central, in fact, to discussions about whether to prosecute Hillary Clinton. Strzok was also asked to work on Comey's draft statement, the purpose of which was to exonerate Clinton. Fox has learned that Strzok is responsible as well for changing the language in that statement from grossly negligent. Had that expression been used, there would have been no choice but to prosecute. Instead, Strzok came up with the two, well, very innocent words, extremely careless, a device to exculpate Mrs. Clinton. Just weeks after the Clinton investigation, Strzok was assigned by the FBI to investigate Russian efforts to interfere in the presidential election, including the DNC hack, which, by the way, the FBI wasn't permitted to actually investigate, and Strzok apparently agreed with the DNC that they would just take somebody's word for the fact that Russians were involved in their servers at the DNC. Strzok's influence reached even the anti-Trump dossier, that discredited dossier, and Strzok became one of a dozen FBI officials who actually received the dossier. And then Strzok was assigned to oversee interviews of General Michael Flynn. Are you starting to see a string of coincidences here and massive contamination of the entire process by an anti-Trump FBI official? Well, the Inspector General's office thinks so. It's investigating Strzok's role in politically sensitive cases, but he's hardly the only one, with massive conflicts of interest. In fact, 9 of the 17 attorneys who served on the Mueller team and special counsel contributed to Democrats, more than half of them, and 5 of those donated individually to Hillary Clinton, all of which means that a call for the firing of Robert Mueller no longer really, truly satisfies any call for accountability. Strzok and Mueller and Comey, in my judgment, should be the subjects of criminal investigations and held fully accountable for crimes against a sitting president and the voters who supported them. Just one man's opinion. The quotation of the evening, this one from Martin Luther King Jr., who said, "He who passively accepts evil is as much involved in it as he who helps to perpetrate it. He who accepts evil without protesting against it is really cooperating with it." And so far, we're cooperating. We're coming right back. President Trump predicts the final passage of the historic tax reform bill by Christmas.
Massive tax cuts and reform through the Senate just happened, and we have a final step to go, and I predict we're going to be very successful.
Republican lawmakers now go to work to reconcile the House version and the Senate version. We take that up with Ed Rollins. And this paddle border has... Joining me now, Ed Rollins, former Reagan political director, Great American PAC chairman, and Fox Business contributor. Ed, great to see you. Let's start with all of the conflicts that now are obvious in the Mueller special counsel and the FBI in the so-called investigations of the email scandal, you name it, anything attached to the name Clinton.
Well, one of the most important agencies did not do a transition when Trump won. Unfortunately, Sessions took himself out. It's an agency that's been stacked by very significant lawyers that are Democrat inclined. They had 8 years of Obama's team in there, and they basically have done everything they can to possibly help her get elected. So that's the reality.
And they've done everything they can to keep her in office when it's pretty clear that this guy, Peter Strzok, top counterintelligence, top FBI official, I mean, he was contaminating the entire procedure.
The other part of the story is his texts are going back and forth to a girlfriend who's also an agent, and they're both married. So I mean, that's a part of it. And why would you be doing that? Why would you, when you're the head of an agency, investigation?
Because I'm in a generous mood, and I thought what I'd do is leave out the part that I thought would probably stay the same even if he didn't engage in the other bad behavior.
But the bad behavior basically had an impact on this. Obviously, was the most intimate thoughts, and his most intimate thoughts was he was very anti-Trump and very pro-Hillary at the time that he's investigating her, and that's why obviously they dropped and fumbled that investigation.
So why in the hell isn't the president ordering his private attorneys to launch every kind of legal action possible against Mueller, against whomever supports Mueller, and Strzok, the FBI? I mean, this is out of control. This is an attempt to take over the United States government. It's absurd to see it. And then you've got one of his attorneys out talking about, well, he authored this, he authored that. I don't want to hear from him. I don't want to hear. I want to see court action. I want to see this man do something. I want a team of lawyers in there to protect the president.
Well, I'm totally supportive of that, and I think the team that's in there is kind of second rate, and no offense to the persons that are trying to do this.
I thought you were being complimentary.
I was being complimentary, and at the end of the day, they're up against the all-star team, the best of the Justice Department. Mueller has an agenda, and they have a strategy, and the strategy is to take this president out. Our side, the president's side, needs every bit as competent lawyers. There's no limit to money that he can raise and get people to do this. They have to take this very seriously. This is going to
You're not surely saying they're not taking it seriously.
Oh, they're not acting like they're taking it seriously. The mere fact that you basically say the president can obstruct justice. My first experience in Washington, D.C. was part of the Nixon administration. I watched 40 smart people get felony attached to their resume. This is not Watergate, but the bottom line, it's the same arrogance. And I just would argue at this point in time, you have a service to this president to make sure he can do his job and protect them.
Let's go to the politics of the thing. Roy Moore in Alabama, he suddenly has a pretty important endorsement, that of President Trump himself. And Mitch McConnell has decided that Roy Moore is a pretty good guy. He's going to let the Alabama folks decide.
Roy Moore went out being outspent 10-1 and basically is winning this race going away. And I think the reality, I'm glad to have the president endorse him. I'm glad that Mitch McConnell has basically decided he needs another senator. And I think that at the end of the day here...
Who the hell are these? You know, who the hell is Mitch McConnell? I mean, why in the... I just don't even understand how remotely he thinks. He sounds like he's doing a favor to the people of Alabama to let them decide who their senator will be?
Well, they don't need favors.
What are you talking about?
They will make their own choice. And to Moore's credit, I mean, Moore has basically had every stupid charge, unsubstantiated charge thrown at him. And he basically has fought through without money, without the big PAC money, what have you. You know, spent 10-1.
I got to ask you about Mitt Romney, the president out in Utah, talking to Mormon leaders, LDS leaders. Let's take a look at the full screen. This is Mitt Romney's latest contribution. Roy Moore in the U.S. Senate would be a stain on the GOP and on the nation. Lee Corfman and other victims are courageous heroes. No vote, no majority is worth losing our honor, our integrity. Thank you for tuning in, Mitt Romney, with about a week to go to the election. This guy is so fumbling, incompetent, and aggravating. I just cannot imagine him back in public life.
He's a man who lost a U.S. Senate race. He's a man who lost the presidency. And I think to a certain extent, he ought to sit up in his mountains and ski and watch the process and stay out of it.
And not get near a microphone.
Or a keyboard. And don't kid yourself. If he runs for that Senate seat, he's going to be right up Trump's tail, and he's going to try and run for president again. And that needs to be stopped.
Well, don't kid yourself. I don't think it's going to happen, partner.